During the Revolutionary War, women demonstrated their support of the colonists against the British in many ways, namely by boycotting British goods. In contrast, during the Civil War, women gave their support by taking on new roles as breadwinners. The most influential efforts made by women were as volunteer nurses. Before the Civil War, women were banned from being nurses because they were believed to be too fragile, an idea that was perpetrated by the cult of domesticity. As the war continued and more soldiers died in combat, the military became so desperate for hospital aides that they allowed women to become nurses. Most volunteers were married women because they had to work intimately with men. Because of the harm of the war, society was willing to subdue its ideal of women's fragility in exchange for healing its troops. Both Northern and Southern women became nurses to support their troops and also became more active members of society. A monument can be found in Kingston, Georgia, in honor of the Southern women nurses who cared for thousands of soldiers that flooded 8 separate Confederate hospitals. Stemming from the inclusion of women in the field of nursing, this allowed a nurse from Washington, D.C., named Clara Barton, to found one of the most influential medical charities to date, the American Red Cross. Before the Civil War, women were also banned from the telegraph industry. As men were recruited for combat, the industry found itself in need of workers and used some women to take over those jobs in the soldiers' absences. At the end of the Civil War, and upon the return of many soldiers, the debate on whether or not it was still appropriate for women to be workers, especially in the telegraph industry, began to take place. The telegraph companies, still grateful for the support of the women when the industry was in need, showed support for the inclusion of women in the industry with its creation of a telegraph school especially for women. Their support was motivated in part by the fact that women were accepting of lower wages than men as long as they could continue to work after the war. After the war, the telegraph industry did have less involvement with women than they had during the war, but the women soon paved the way to a labor movement that swept the entire nation.